magic circles and drawing magic circles. Let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to my channel. My name is Karina of Karina Pulaski Pilates, and today I'm going to be getting into a brief history of two kinds of magic circles. Magic circles with a C, invented by Joseph Pilates, used in Pilates, and the magic circles, magic ending with a K, that we draw in our witchcraft practice. It is a beautiful sunny afternoon here in late August, so you may hear some wind, some birds chirping, and there is currently a popsicle salesfolk walking down the street with their carts. So you may hear some jingling there, but we're gonna get right into it. So starting off the discussion, I'm gonna talk about the Pilates magic circle. It was also called the Pilates ring, and what I have right here is the balanced body magic circle that's used for a wide array of things, of course. But the magic circle was invented by Joseph Pilates, of course. There isn't any technical patent or exact date of invention that he came up with this piece of equipment, but we speculate that it was 1920s, 1930s that he came up with it. It was around the 1920s, mid-1920s, that it was likely invented by him, as 1926 is when he started his studio with Clara in New York City on infamously 939 8th Street. So that is when it is speculated that it was invented. Interestingly, the Pilates circle originally, the archival classical circles, would have been made of metal and some form of rubber. He used a beer keg ring that went around the beer keg and added cushions for obviously comfort and usability. But essentially the magic circle was created to offer controlled resistance that could mimic some of the mechanics and resistance tension that we were receiving from other equipment like the universal reformer, now lovingly as the reformer, of course, but the way that we would press pedals on chairs and resist springs with the tower. A lot of more modern circles like this will have forms of foam or some sort of plastic, but it is in mimicking that resistance there to create precision. Especially when we focus the breath on that movement, you could create a lot more control, which was the aim. He also wanted to make resistance a bit more portable, so maybe you didn't have room for a reformer or the Wanda chair or electric chair, but maybe you had room for one of these bad boys. The great thing about the circle is it did require you to concentrate and slow down and stay a bit more present and intentional with your movements, and that is exactly what Joe wanted his clients and all of us to do. I wrote down a note here. It was a great quote from Mary Bowen. It is, "The ring makes you think, it demands that you focus, and that's what Joe always wanted, concentration." Another piece of brief but interesting lore is that it was used often to strengthen the inner thighs and pelvic floor muscles, and oftentimes these are muscles that are used in sexual health and sexual function, of course. So a bit of lore around the origin of the name magic circle is that if you were strong and used one of these to strengthen the pelvic floor, having sex was like magic. Big fan of the magic circle. I love to add it in, especially for mat flows, but also for creating some sort of added spice when we're doing reformer work, but there are other places I'll use it too. Moving on to magic circles in witchcraft. What is a magic circle? It is a boundary or protective sacred space that a witch, ceremonial magician, practitioner creates in order to contain spirits, to protect themselves from not wanted or potentially negative energies, but also to create a boundary to invite beings alongside of. It's basically creating a dome of energy and protection around you in which to create rituals, to do prayers, spell work, any of those ritualistic practices, and to hold ceremonies. Interesting little factoid, but unfortunately the circle was demonized as you can suspect during the witch trials, often being depicted as demons dancing around the edge. Although, going to be completely honest, I'm not against working with demons. That's a whole nother video. We'll get into that later. But typically aimed to patronize and torture women, they were depicted dancing around these circles with the devil to imply that all witches were working in cahoots with the devil. So how do you draw a magic circle? Well, typically you would cleanse the space, cleanse the tools or any kind of spell materials that you would be using. You would outline walking clockwise in a circle, the space you planned on working in, the space that you had cleansed. Different practices, different traditions have different ways of approaching this, but typically if you were, say, Wiccan, it's quintessential to Wiccan practice to call the quarters, and to call those quarters, it would be north, east, south, and west, of course. Circles were drawn throughout history with all kinds of tools, from using a pen on the floor or a piece of chalk to inscribing it into the floor, whether you are on a wooden floor, in dirt, or in the grass. In Wiccan practices, the north was typically considered earth, east would be air, south fire, and west would represent water. So typically you would have something to symbolize these: air, feathers, incense, water. Of course, water might be in a chalice or a bowl. Salt is a great representation of the earth, but of course you could have literal earth, dirt, soil, and fire, some sort of flame, candle, or cauldron. So next, you've walked around, you've drawn the barrier, you've drawn the boundary, you've cleansed the space, you've called all of the quarters. At this point, you set up for your ritual, whatever that looks like for you. Not much more to be said there. At this point also, you would do any sort of invocations if you're working with any particular elements, spirits, angels, demons, fae, deities, what have you. If you work with a particular pantheon or maybe even ancestral work, you would call those powers in, invite them to work with you and be in that space, and you would complete your spell. At this point, you would want to close and reground the energy. So you would dismiss the quarters, dismiss the spirits, thank them for being there. Always thank them for being there and working with you. Fae can be a little tricky with thank yous. That's another video. But making sure to show the gratitude and close the ceremony. It would be very disrespectful to invite them, expect work and community and teamwork from them, and then to not send them off. And at that point, you would walk widdershins, or this would be walking counterclockwise to close your circle. Finally, and most important, you have just put so much energy into this spell work, you need to reground. Especially before you just continue on with your mundane life, continue on with the day, you have to have some sort of opening and closing, at least in my opinion. So grounding back into the earth, sinking energy back into the soil the same way you would in meditation or when you're hiking or before Pilates practice, I think anyways. And eat something, drink something. But most importantly, listen to your body. If you're not hungry, don't eat. If you're not thirsty, don't drink. Listen to your body, but highly recommended to replenish your energy. Magical circles have a deep, diverse history. We have ancient papyri going all the way back to 100 Common Era, 400 before Common Era Greco-Roman practices, even using wands to draw those. Also in Egypt and Mesopotamia, thousands and thousands of years ago, ceremonial magicians and practitioners would talk a lot about drawing a sacred space. Sacred geometry was very important as well, so circles have always been a sacred shape in nature and in spiritual practice going back millennia. More infamous documentation of circles, especially with very traditional ceremonial magic, such as in books like the Key of Solomon or the Lesser Key of Solomon. Those are two very important grimoires. If you're interested, let me know. I will make a video about those two pieces of work. Although I don't work with them in particular in my practice, but I think that anytime you're entering a spiritual practice like witchcraft, which is so unique to you but comes with a very long, diverse history, it's important to learn as much as you can and honor that, because it's often easy enough for us to just walk over and find all of the cool, fun, witchy things without going deep into the education. And there's a long history of pain and trauma, but also beauty and tradition in it. So take the time. I would highly recommend. Ooh, bell is chiming. If I was to find a connection between the magic circle and drawing magic circles, I would just say that both things are used with deep concentration. Both are used for control. A magic circle would be used for control and concentration in our Pilates practice, what have you. And a magic circle is used to concentrate energy and control where energy is flowing. And as I've said in my first video, both Pilates and witchcraft give me a space and a practice that I can get inside of my body with and be present. But anyways, thank you so much for joining me in this brief history/magic circle drawing how-to video. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below. Be sure to like and subscribe because there is much more to come. And until next time, I hope you are safe, sending you lots of love to whatever corner of the world you are in. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.